right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And we're doing a segment. These segments are going to be part of a series that is going to be called, because there's several of them already in there, the Long War series. And you can find that on my YouTube channel, Politics by Jake, and go to the Long War series, and you'll find it there. And the shows that comprise this series are more or less consecutive and are happening now. And I, for the sake of anyone who wants to listen to it at another time, I'm not going to tell what the date is. But this is yet another one, and we're on part 3. And we've been on part 3 since yesterday, and we're going to be talking about more part 3. And we may well, in fact, do another show on part 3. I haven't decided yet. And there's more coming. So with that, the last time we left off, literally, we were talking about weaponizing things and how the authoritarians love to weaponize things, and they go against what we talk about as the old Roman phrase, the mos maiorum, which is customs, ancient norms, or just norms, things that have come to be, ordinary ways that people do things that aren't written down. They don't have to be written down. And we ended the last show, talking about when authoritarians stop respecting the unwritten rules, the norms, and the decencies, and begin weaponizing the silences of the Constitution, especially when it comes to debt, for example. And I talked about how there are no debtors' prisons. There used to be, and when it comes to shutdowns, there didn't used to be shutdowns until John Boehner, but now there are, and especially now when it comes to hunger. These things never used to be, but the fascist right, authoritarians, if you want to call them that, I like to call them the fascist right, because honestly, they're fascist. And I talk about on the show why that is. They're absolutely positively fascist, and one of the hallmarks of fascism, as we talked about by Giovanni Gentili in 1922, also many years later, well, some years later, some good long years later, in 1936, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he was talking about it, talked about the fact that, and he defined it as the means of production controlled either by private business or private interest. And he felt that one of the most particularly obnoxious things and disgusting things about this, and one of the most repugnant things to the idea of the constitutional republic that we have, is that these private interests and these businesses are arrogant. And he said, using his words, paraphrasing, but these are his words, this is what he said: they come to look upon government, your government, the government by and for and about the people, the one that we're living under right now, as a mere appendage to their own affairs. Well, I don't know about you. That annoys the hell out of me. I don't like that at all. I don't like that one bit. And I promise that at the end of the show, we're going to talk about, and we're going to now, talk about how these new kingsmen, as I call them, learn to weaponize ambiguity. And how they're using it to test the limits of American democracy. And with that, we pick up, and we're back. And welcome to the show. And let me take you deeper, okay, into what I mean when I say the Constitution wasn't designed to withstand this kind of political actor. Benjamin Franklin said, you've got a republic if you can keep it. And he also said that if America is going to be great, it'll be because it is good. And if it ceases to be good, it'll cease to be great. That's what we're dealing with now. Because you have people who don't appreciate the mos maiorum. They don't appreciate customs, norms. And you might say, oh, well, there are legitimate things that can be talked about by the country. Yeah, there are. There absolutely are. There are legitimate things. There are legitimate things. But whether people can have food or not, that's not legitimate. That's manipulative. And either in this show or in coming show in this series, I'll be talking about examples of that in history. So, for most of American history, the Republic has run on two engines. Number one, written law, and the other one was written restraint. And the second one, unwritten restraint, that's the one that's collapsing now. And this is what the Romans meant by the mos maiorum, the way of the elders, the inherited civic code, the moral ballast that kept the ship upright even when the storms hit. Because there are some things you don't do. You don't threaten senators. You don't tell them or announce to the people that they're going to be executed or that they should be executed. You don't demolish wings of the White House without authorization, even if an argument could be made legally that you could do that. You don't do it. And there is an argument, for a legal argument for you don't do it. You don't weaponize hunger. You don't go to the Supreme Court, as Ketanji Brown Jackson did, and issued a ruling said, well, we had a judge at the lower level, a Rhode Island judge, who said, ordered the federal government to pay SNAP benefits. Pay them and pay them now. You see, these people, and that's why they like Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is a doofus. Donald Trump is a child. Donald Trump is like Mikey on the Life food cereals that you've heard me talk about, and which many of you may not know, but those of you who are older and grew up more in the time period of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s will know Mikey. Mikey is a little child who is eating cereal. He'll eat anything, and the older kids, they won't eat Life cereal because they're afraid it's healthy or something like that. And healthy equates to not good and not something that they would want to eat. And so in the commercial, they say to themselves, let's give it to Mikey. Because Mikey, he'll eat anything. Let's see if he likes it. And of course, Mikey likes it, and that's the gist of the commercial. Trump is Mikey. He's a doofus. He's a 5-year-old. He's a mentally ill person. I am not just saying these things. He is fixated in his mental condition at the level of a 5-year-old. When he learned, and this is Mary Trump, a board-certified psychologist, no less, who grew up with him and who knows him very well, who is saying this thing, that he realized that not only was he not loved, but he was never going to be loved. And, this is powerful. And you have Ketanji Brown Jackson of the Supreme Court, extraordinary, because she's one of the supposedly liberal justices. She's one of the supposedly progressive justices. And she said, well, okay, we have this order from the lower court, but we're not going to do it. We're just going to allow the appeal of the administration, which didn't want to pay it, and was appealing the ruling of the Rhode Island District Court judge. We're just going to let it leisurely wend its way through the courts. And we're not going to do anything about it. And the people will starve, but yeah, let them eat cake. Yeah, Ketanji Brown Jackson, liberal, progressive justice. She did that. So this is a thing, and this is going on, and this is one of the reasons why I'm talking about it. You don't weaponize hunger. And the Supreme Court weaponized it. The district court, no. At the district court level, they have a lot more sense. They're still holding on to their common sense. They still have a grasp on the law. And when you get into the rarefied air of these higher courts, they then begin to be more political appointments, which is not to say that the ones at the district court level are not. Eileen Cannon is a great example down in Miami, Florida. She's a political appointment. And she's just a mess. She's just awful. And so they lose their bearings. But you don't weaponize hunger, but they're trying to weaponize hunger. You don't test how much cruelty the public will tolerate, okay? Not because those things were always explicitly illegal, but because they were beneath the dignity of the office and beyond the pale of the republic. For 240 years, the presidency wasn't just a job, it was a trust. And trust assumes restraint. But here's the pivot where the trouble starts. The authoritarian mind sees restraint as a virtue, not as a virtue, pardon me, but as a weakness. And they see it concomitantly as a green light. And he sees any area where the Constitution leaves ambiguous as an opportunity. Every silence as a green light. Every untested boundary as a stress point to be exploited. And this is the defining characteristic of Trump's movement, the New King's Men. They govern not by what the Constitution allows, but what they think that they can get away with. They having packed the courts in advance. They having packed the legislature in advance. I mean, look at the shutdown weapon. That's the 14th Amendment that says the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. Now, the right uses this as a shutdown, although the Democrats recently used it, and I'm against that, and that's another show. And I've talked about that before, and I don't want to talk about that before. But it's historically unthinkable. Until recently, it's constitutionally suspect because of the 14th Amendment public debt clause. You don't question the debt of the United States. And mind you, just so you understand the way this goes, the debt that's being questioned is the money that's already been spent. Okay? So when they shut down, they're basically saying, we're not going to pay the bond markets the money that we've already spent. The Constitution expressly prohibits this. Let me repeat it, okay? The validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. And I want to go further with this so you understand. The wording is not may not be questioned. It is not should not be questioned. Shall not be questioned. The debt, once lawfully incurred, it must be honored. This is not subject to political extortion. This is not a bargaining chip. So why do shutdowns exist at all? They do because earlier generations understood that questioning the debt or threatening to disrupt the functioning of the government flirted with treason, to say nothing of the fact that it was plainly unconstitutional. But someone, John Boehner, yes, and you know, John Boehner is like a mini segment of a show. He's just a whole other story, and we're not going to get into him. I remember John Boehner when he was using the House floor to hand out bonuses to tobacco companies for selling cigarettes, for selling more cigarettes, for the salesman who sold the most cigarettes. He was handing out bonuses and giving them awards, and he was doing this on the floor of the House of Representatives. That's John Boehner. So if he could do that, you know, cigarettes, cancer sticks, how good could he be? And so, yes, he was willing to break that unwritten rule. Someone was willing to say, what happens if we hold the full faith and credit of the United States hostage? What happens? Let's do it. Let's see what happens. And now, your modern authoritarian faction, Trump included, takes that same logic because of what it worked, what it's been done, and they push that to the brink. If they can hold the debt hostage, what else can they hold hostage? Like the agencies, like the courts, the federal workforce, the food supply, the benefits pipeline, the hunger safety net. See, this is where the constitutional crisis becomes operational. And the things I have listed, they're doing them all now. Because once the system is willing to tolerate one form of political sabotage, it becomes vulnerable to all of them. And let me put it bluntly, shutdowns, they were the first domino in the collapse of unwritten restraint. And at this point, we've gone on a little bit longer without a break. Let's take a break, and we'll have a message, and then we'll be back. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. So, as I said, shutdowns were the first domino in the collapse of unwritten restraint. Once you learn, as they have, that the country will tolerate that level of pain, you test something else. Can we slow walk federal assistance? Can we do that? Can we manipulate SNAP? Can we use hunger? SNAP is the food program administered by the federal government through the states. Can we use hunger as leverage? Can we starve out political pressure? Can we do that? Dare we do that? What will be the consequences for doing that? See, this is what I mean about testing the limits. Can we create selective suffering, like with the air traffic controllers, and say, we're not going to pay you, but you still have to do your shift or we're going to fire you? So that they have to go out and they have to work jobs as Uber drivers, for example. You know what I mean? Additional work. So that they can afford to feed their family and they still have to do their shift, otherwise they get fired. Can we do that to the air traffic controllers? See what happens. Let's see what happens. Can we claim executive immunity while doing it? You see, this is what they're doing. And each test teaches them something. And they're always doing it. They're always doing it. And we talk about John Boehner and the shutdowns. This was contemplated before John Boehner. You don't need to think that John Boehner came up with this all by himself. He didn't. He's just a political shill. And of course, he's, long gone now. And that is why Trump's movement governs like a lab experiment. Every crisis is a data point. Every outage is calculation. Every act of cruelty is it's like a pilot program. It's not for policy. It's for power, because the real goal is not shutting down the government. It's shutting down resistance. And when you combine constitutional ambiguity, lack of restraint, a compliant faction in Congress, and a judiciary increasingly captured by ideological loyalists, you get what political scientists call an authoritarian leaning. Well, they needed something. I mean, there was the liberal consensus, The Republicans are always so jealous. Oh, we have to get something. Now we've got the authoritarian leaning. Yay! So it's not authoritarianism itself. We're not there. We have authoritarian characters in the government. There is no doubt about that. But it's the learning phase, you see? This is the window when authoritarians see what the system tolerates and adjust accordingly. And right now, they are learning that the public can be pushed. And they've got a doofus, they've got a Mikey sitting in the executive chair, which is Donald Trump, who's stupid, who doesn't, honestly, he is. I'm sorry for those of you. Stupid. No, he is stupid. It's the people behind him that are doing the learning. They're learning that hunger is an effective lever. They're learning that rights can be narrowed by inaction. They are learning that the Ninth Amendment can be ignored simply by never invoking it. Just don't do it. They're learning, same with the 14th Amendment. Just shut down, not pay the debt, just don't even bring that up. They're learning that the boundaries of the Constitution are only as strong as the people's willingness to enforce them. And that's where all of this ties back to the Ninth Amendment. If the courts can be convinced, slowly, probably not at the district level, like we said, because those guys still have a grasp on reality, slowly, through attrition and precedent, that unenumerated rights don't matter, or they don't exist, or they can be overridden, well, then the strong man wins without ever needing to repeal anything, because you don't have to rewrite the Constitution necessarily to destroy it. Just ignore the parts that limit your power. And that's the war that we're in. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And now we're going to go to Rome. Not Rome as it is now, but Rome as it was in ancient times, 2,000 years ago or thereabouts. Because Rome is always the warning label on the constitutional box. Everybody loves to compare America to the Roman Empire. But the collapse didn't begin in the Roman Empire with emperors or marble or legions. It began with food. Listen to this carefully. In a republic, any republic, hunger is the first instrument of political control. Rome learned this early. The Roman annona, which is the grain supply, largely came from North Africa. And this in itself is at least a segment of show, but we're talking about something else now. But it largely came from North Africa. Those ships were the lifeline of the plebeians, the workers, the urban poor. If the grain fleets docked, Rome functioned. If the grain fleets were delayed, or if they were diverted, Rome trembled. And the people of Rome suffered. And it was exactly this pressure point that ambitious men exploited. A few power-hungry senators or provincial governors, they could withhold grain just long enough to create desperation and then present themselves as the savior. A violence of logistics, a manipulation of hunger. And let me tell you something. The easiest way to bend a democracy is to starve its base. And that's not melodrama. That's political sciences. And now let's return to America. In November of this year, 42 million Americans were about to lose snap because of one Supreme Court justice. Ketanji Brown Jackson, of all peoples, allowed this is her statement. She allowed the well, it's not her statement, but it's a good paraphrasal. Allowed the regime to withhold payments while the challenge, and this is her words, worked its way through the system. Worked its way through the system? People don't work their way through starvation. The SNAP crisis was not an accident. It was not administrative chaos. It was not governmental confusion. It was a weapons test. Just like how I used to talk about in years past, how QAnon and what happened on January 6th and QAnon's part in it, January 6th, 2021, was a psyop worked upon the American people. So too was this. It was a controlled burn. It was a stress analysis. It was a way of seeing what happens when the food supply of the poor is placed in political hands and squeezed. Exactly like Rome. And the lesson authoritarian factions learn from these tests is simple. They'll tolerate it. And that's the part, honestly, that keeps me up at night. Because the danger isn't just the cruelty, though the cruelty is obscene. The danger is that the ruling faction saw the results. They saw the outcry. They watched what even their progressive judges were willing to do. Judges who politically should not have been in favor of this point of view, but who were willing to let it wend its way through the system. Let's just let it work its way through the system. That's Ketanji Brown Jackson. That's not John Roberts. That's not Amy Coney Barrett. That's Ketanji Brown Jackson. And they tracked that. They measured the response. They watched the polling. And they concluded, hunger works. Hunger pressures. Hunger moves the needle. And when the regime sees that, withholding food rights lights a fire under Congress and scares Democrats, and it did. That was the thing that caused them to cave. And panics state officials and divides communities and forces compromise. They log that. They put a mark down on that. Just like the ancient Roman elite did, because this is the real game. Authoritarians don't just rule by force, they rule by scarcity. Scarcity of money, scarcity of housing, scarcity of health care, scarcity of time, scarcity of breath, if you're talking about police power, and scarcity of food. This is where the show meets the Ninth Amendment, because while the Constitution explicitly enumerates many rights, the Ninth Amendment does something remarkable. It recognizes that there are additional rights not listed, and that these rights belong to the people, not the states, not the federal government, the people. The right to bodily autonomy, the right to privacy. I said I was going to tell you about some of these. Here they are. The right to travel, the right to raise one's children, the right to contract. That's actually specifically in the Constitution. The right to sustenance. Yeah, the right to sustenance. You can't have liberty without survival, and honestly, you need more than survival, but you cannot have citizenship without nourishment. A people starving cannot be free. You cannot have political agency if you're worried about where your next meal comes from. You can't. It doesn't work. It doesn't exist. The Ninth Amendment protects precisely those implicit foundation human rights. The ones earlier generations assumed they're too obvious to need mentioning. But now we live in an era where nothing is too obvious to weaponize. And Trump and his would-be monarchists look at the Ninth Amendment as a smorgasbord of permissions, not permissions for the people. No, not that. Permissions for the state to strip away anything that is not explicitly protected or that lies ambiguous. And their logic is brutal. And it's simple. If the Constitution doesn't explicitly say you have the right to eat, well, then maybe you don't. And that is why the SNAP crisis was not just a funding debate. It was a constitutional stress test. And let me underscore something, okay? The Roman Republic fell long before Caesar crossed the Rubicon. It fell when elites realized they could control the masses by controlling the grain. Once food became a political lever, potato, the Republic's fate was sealed. Not immediately, but inevitably, because the social contract had been broken at its most basic level. That's one of the things this is one of the reasons why, and I talk about this sometimes on the show. I have a business colleague. She's in Arizona, smart, great person, love her a lot. Has a different attitude about China. Says that China is just a great place. She's a Sinophile, S-I-N-O. She's a China lover, and the reason that she so often comes up with and says that she's a China lover is because they can feed themselves. And she's kind of right. Because for decades, there was starvation in China. Because China had so many people it couldn't feed itself, and the communists came along and they proposed the idea of the iron rice bowl. And what is that? It's this. You stay out of politics, and we'll give you a bowl of rice every day. What do you think about that? Deal? Sound good? That's what it is. It's called the phenomenon of the iron rice bowl. That's what it is. You leave politics to us, and we'll feed you. And they actually did, and they were able to do that thanks to capitalism. So getting back to what we were talking about, once food became a political lever, potato, the Republic's fate was sealed, not immediately, but inevitably, because the social contract, and what I explained to you just now about China, that's a social contract. Stay out of politics, and we'll feed you. We'll make sure you get your bowl of rice every day. And, I'm speaking euphemistically. You know what I mean. The social contract had been broken in Rome at its most basic level. You can't starve your people and claim to govern them. You can only rule them. And those are not the same thing. And that is exactly the fork in the road in modern America. And at this point, let's take another break. This is Politics by Jake, and we will be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we ended the last segment talking about this is exactly the fork in the road in modern America, because if the regime can weaponize hunger once, don't you think they'll do it again? You think when John Boehner inaugurated or initiated the first shutdown, do you think they thought it was just going to be a one-time thing and it was never going to happen again? Did it, in fact, happen again? Yes, it did. And it's going to be the same thing with this. If the regime can weaponize hunger once, they'll do it again. And they'll do it because it works. Because it frightens politicians. And it frightened the left. It frightened them because they were decent. And they were realized at the very last, no matter how much they had hoped. And I think that they had their eyes open. I don't think that they're starry-eyed optimists necessarily. But I think they were trying to work the system that they were familiar with. But the problem is that the other side wasn't playing. And when it came right down to it, they saw that the Republicans were willing to do this. They were willing to be like Mikey. They were willing to eat anything. And, of course, the House at this time is captured. My colleague Heather Cox Richardson talked about somebody. I can't remember who she talked about, but she used the word lickspittle. That's a word I use, lickspittle, to reference Mike Johnson, MAGA Mike of the porn app, MAGA Mike Johnson, who is a lickspittle, and Trump knows it. And for the sake of his office, his privilege, his esteem, his sense of self, he's willing to, because Trump has said, I'm not just the president, I'm the Speaker of the House too. Because he knows that Johnson is just a puppet. He's a lickspittle. That's what a lickspittle is. Someone who will kneel down on his hands and knees to lick the spit up off of the ground that you have spit down on. And that's what he is. And when Trump said that, he was right, because that's all he is. But, Johnson doesn't care. And it should give us all pause to know that there are these kinds of office seekers in our government who will bear with these insufferable indignities and insults for the sake of their office. Because this isn't governance. So it did frighten the politicians. It destabilizes communities, undoubtedly, because it creates desperation. Desperation makes citizens malleable. You see the stakes now. I mean, some religions, not just Christian religions, but some religions fast. And fasting means anything from 2 meals to 24 hours, and 2 meals and 24 hours aren't necessarily the same thing. And some people, they get a little fanatical about it, and they will fast for longer. But I urge you, if you want to do an experiment, I urge you to not eat for 2 meals, not eat for 24 hours. See how you feel at the end of that 24 hours. Are you thinking you're feeling a little desperate? Are you a little frightened? Are you wondering where your next meal is coming from? Are you a little anxious? Well, okay, then you see the stakes now. See, the SNAP struggle wasn't about food. It was about whether the government can use deprivation as a political weapon. And if you don't believe me, just go ahead and do that. Do a little experiment. See how you feel after 24 hours. Hell, see how you feel after 18 or 19 hours, which would be about 2 meals. No, no. This was about whether the Ninth Amendment has any meaning left, whether unenumerated rights still exist. It's stupid. Seriously? We have to declare food as a right? Well, whether basic human survival is a public right or a political favor, whether a republic can remain a republic if the ruling faction can decide who eats and who doesn't. Because once you can withhold food, you can withhold anything. And at this point, we'll take a break and we'll be back with more Politics by Jake. Look around you. The systems are failing. The currency, the courts, the Constitution. And no one is coming to save you. You feel it. You see it. But you've been told to ignore it. This isn't paranoia. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's collapse. Designed, accelerated, and now unavoidable. So what's your plan? What happens when the banks close? When the grid goes down? When they come knocking and you have nothing protected, nothing structured, nothing left? You don't need a bunker. You need a protocol. The collapse protocol is the plan for people who still think clearly, who want to live, thrive, and protect what's theirs, even in a world gone mad. You don't have time. You don't have backup. But now you have this. Collapse protocol from Twain Consulting before the end begins. Contact us as soon as you can. Facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call us at 213-465-0639. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And now that we're after the break, let's go to the next battlefield, which is FDR's Second Bill of Rights. We're going to talk about this more on another show, but let's get started on this now. What he saw coming, FDR, when we talk about FDR, of course, we're talking about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 4-term president of the United States. What he saw coming and why our generation is now living the constitutional crisis he tried to prevent. Rome showed us the danger. The snap crisis showed us the tactic. And the Ninth Amendment showed us the framework that the founders intended for rights we have, even if the text doesn't list them, one by one. But now we go to the only American president who ever tried to confront this head on, and that was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR, as he was often referred to, understood something that modern political class pretends not to understand, or in the case of this regime, intentionally ignores. A political right is meaningless if you're too hungry, if you're too sick, if you're out on the street, if you're sleeping in the rain, if you're too cold, or if you're too poor to exercise it. You can have freedom of speech, sure. But if you're starving, you're not whispering about your rights, you're whispering about where your next meal is coming from, like I said in the last segment. You can have freedom of assembly, you can. But if you're evicted, you're just wandering along the streets, trying to find a place. You can have the right to vote. But if you're crushed by debt or working 3 jobs, you're voting in exhaustion. You don't have the time, which is, of course, why Politics by Jake. Political education, you can't politically educate yourself. Or your political education comes from, will I be able to work 2 jobs instead of 3? What candidate will do that for me? Or what candidate will take away my debt? Or what candidate will make sure I get 3 meals a day? This isn't freedom. This is compulsion. And this is what FDR was trying to solve. when he introduced the Second Bill of Rights in 1944. And let me remind you, he introduced it pretty much after winning the war and after confronting fascism on the battlefield. He understood that defeating tyranny abroad wasn't enough. You have to defeat the conditions tyranny feeds on at home. And it was the money changers in the temple, as he described, who he called them out and he said, they have failed. And they hated him. Why? Because he was a rich man. He was a rich man. He was a member of the class that he was attacking politically. And they hated him for it. They despised him for it, tried to kill him. So you have to defeat the conditions tyranny feeds on at home. And what were those rights? It's the right to a decent job. It's the right to fair pay. It's the right to housing. It's the right to medical care. It's the right to education. It's the right to have a dignified life. These weren't socialist fantasies. They were the logical extension of the Constitution, the practical application of the Ninth Amendment. Because the founders said, you have rights that exist beyond the text, and they belong to the people. And FDR said, okay, well, let's name them then. And then, after we name them, let's legislate them. Let's protect them. Let's write them in stone, as it were, because leave them undefined leaves them vulnerable. So let's jump ahead now, shall we? Let's go forward 80 years or so to Trump's America in his second regime, where the opposite philosophy reigns. Trump and his monarchist cabal believe that the Constitution is a menu of what the government doesn't owe you. A list of, whether they believe it or not, it's the stance that they're taking. It's a list of constraints to be gamed. It's a document to be stripped for parts. It's a tool of power. It's not a charter of rights. So they test every hinge that the founders left loose, every ambiguity, every unenumerated right. They are running constitutional experiments in real time, using the people of the United States as laboratory rats. And like I said, the SNAP crisis, that was a pressure test. The attacks on, it's not like the food wasn't there. The attacks on the press is a freedom of speech, stress test. The purges of the civil service, separation of powers, stress test. The flirtation with extrajudicial punishment, calling senators traitors, libelous, implying executions, that's a due process stress test. And all of it flows from the same central question. What happens when a government no longer accepts the social contract, but instead tries to replace it with raw power? Because you see, that's what's happening. FDR tried to prevent exactly this moment. He understood, because as I say, he was a rich man and he knew his class. He knew what they were capable of. He understood with absolute clarity that authoritarianism does not begin with soldiers in the streets. It begins with insecurity. It begins with necessitousness. Insecure housing, insecure wages, insecure food, insecure health care, insecure rights. Because insecure people, well, they're easier to govern. You can govern them by fear. You can govern them by 24/7, 365, and this regime knows it. And that's why what we have seen of this regime, who has roundly been called out in the November 2025 elections, didn't even last a year. Popularity down as low as can be, as low as can be. But they don't care because they're out for something else. And that's why the snap test matters. That's why the 14th Amendment matters. That's why the 9th Amendment matters. That's why FDR's second Bill of Rights matters, because this is the battle not of left between right, but of republicanism and authoritarianism. Between the founders' vision of a democratic republic where rights can grow and expand with time, and the Trumpist vision of a shrinking, brittle document that protects power from people instead of people from power. And let me leave you with this. The American experiment, it only works if the government treats its people as citizens, not subjects. Citizens have rights, including, as the 9th Amendment so clearly shows, rights not yet named. Subjects, they have permissions, they have licenses, they have privileges, and these can either be granted or revoked by the ruler. And right now, the regime is trying to see how far they can move us from one category to the other before anybody notices. But you noticed, and I noticed, and millions more are waking up by the week. And so, the question before us, the question of the 9th Amendment, the question of Rome, the question of hunger, the question of rights, the question of authoritarian testing, it's brutally simple. Do we accept a government that rules by scarcity, or do we fight for one that governs by dignity? That is the fight of 2025, which the voters in that election loudly proclaimed. And that's the fight of 2026. And the fight of 2026 will be to see if what Trump has done has a chilling effect on elections. Because they know what happened in 2025. Oh, they see it. They see it. So now, this is a fight of the ballot box. This is a fight of this generation. And we must not lose it. Because republics don't fall when tyrants rise. Republics fall when citizens surrender. And we're not surrendering. And this is Politics by Jake. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together.